This afternoon, the National Transportation Safety Board will release its preliminary findings on the deadly mid-air collision earlier this year in the Washington, D.C. area. In January, a passenger plane and Black Hawk helicopter crashed into each other over the Potomac River. There were no survivors. 64 people were on board the American Airlines flight. 3 service members were on the helicopter. Today's report will come just days after a small plane crashed near a retirement village in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. That happened on Sunday. All 5 people on board the flight survived, but 3 were sent to a burn center.
With us now, let's begin the staff writer in The Atlantic, focusing on politics and national security, Isaac Stanley Becker, whose latest piece is titled "The FAA's Troubles Are More Serious Than You Know." Also with his government affairs representative for the Association of Professional Flight Attendants, Alex Roberts. He is a second-generation aviation worker and has a recent opinion piece in the Tennessean titled, It is still safe to fly, but less so under Trump." Thank you guys so much for being with us. Greatly appreciated. Isaac, let me start with you. Post-COVID, we lost a lot of pilots. We lost a lot of flight attendants, lost a lot of people in the towers. There are a lot of people that got out of aviation. We expressed our concern for some time, especially about the people in the towers that got out. And this didn't just start in January, obviously. We've been reporting for 2 years now about near misses on runways. So, first of all, talk about air safety today, the extraordinary record we have had, but also how this has been for some time, a system that's just kind of, breaking at the seams.
This is such a critical point. Some of the staffing issues date back some time, and the FAA has been trying to reckon with this. And that's part of the reason why it was so surprising when this fork in the road email came out toward the end of January, and this offer of early retirement initially went out to the entire FAA workforce. That includes air traffic controllers and others in really, really key safety roles. And there's been a lot of discussion about what the interest in this was and how many are leaving. And what I was able to do is get a hold of some actual data from inside the agency that showed the interest in that offer. More than 1,300 people inside the FAA responding to it, initially including about 100 air traffic controllers. Now, after about a week, those job categories and some others were exempted, but it set off just absolute alarm inside the agency about the possibility that air traffic controllers would be sacrificed as part of this reduction.
So, Alex, your piece, it's still safe to fly, but less so under Trump. How so?
Well, good morning, and it's an honor to be on. Thank you. The first priority of crew members is the safety and security of our passengers. And unfortunately, these reckless Trump administration cuts are making that job much more difficult. And that doesn't just impact the crew members, obviously. That impacts the 3 million Americans who travel daily in the United States. So I really want to drive home the point that, yes, air travel is still the safest form of transportation in our country. But that reality is not inevitable, and it didn't happen by accident. And these reckless cuts by the Trump administration are making that reality less so. So I felt obliged to write this op-ed in the Tennessean because this is a personal issue for me. My mother was a flight attendant for over 20 years. I represent with the APFA union nearly 30,000 flight attendants across the country. And so these are my friends, my family, not just my colleagues. And so I really want to get the message out that these reckless cuts are doing damage.
Well, Jonathan Lemire, it's so fascinating. One of the showdowns during that meeting that we've been talking about between Elon Musk and cabinet members came from Sean Duffy, Transportation Secretary, who said, dude, I'm paraphrasing here in sort of Florida beach talk, dude, you're trying to fire flight attendants while planes are crashing, which Musk said, oh, I haven't done that, and you can't prove it. And he goes, yeah, you didn't do it because I didn't let it happen. That is, again, the madness of all this. We have had, since post-COVID, a problem with having enough air traffic controllers, and the idea that they're randomly going to cut these, first of all, undermines it. Secondly, Donald Trump coming out the day after and blaming air traffic controllers because of some imaginary DEI crisis also sends a lot of them going to the exits. I mean, we have a real problem here, don't we, Jonathan? It does seem that we have a Treasury Secretary who understands that.
Yeah, well, this transportation secretary
yeah,
was a former cast member on The Real World, so he might have said "dude." So let's not rule that out. But your points are exactly right. And Isaac, it's a great piece, and want to dive into sort of what Joe just had to say there about some of the DEI cuts or recommendations, because. Correctly, the secretary did stand up to Musk in last week, but when I was in the White House briefing room when he stood alongside President Trump when Trump blamed DEI for that crash in Washington. Tell us the latest there, the sort of where things stand with the workforce.
Well, you have to understand what was happening at the FAA at the end of January. So you have this terrible mid-air collision, 67 people dead in the worst U.S. aviation disaster in recent history. You have this fork-in-the-road email from Musk's team at DOGE trying to reduce the workforce. And then you have the president of the United States stand up and blame, a day after the crash, blame it on DEI programs, of course, without evidence. And I tried to understand and get inside this moment at this agency performing such critical work. And what I was told is that this really baffled the workforce. One senior executive decided to quit that day in disgust because of this display and this performance. And so it really contributed to this morale crisis, as I was told, inside the agency, with people describing a workforce that, just all-time low in terms of morale and the ability to focus on their critical mission.
All right, staff writer at The Atlantic, Isaac Stanley Becker, and government affairs representative for the Association of Professional Flight Attendants, Alex Roberts. Thank you both very much for coming on this morning and covering this.